I'm Sophia Reynolds, 28, standing in my grandfather's empty diner with trembling hands, holding a letter that would change everything. Just this morning, my brother James cruised by in his shiny BMW, mockingly waving as I served coffee in my waitress uniform. Still playing servant while I handled Grandpa's real assets, he'd sneered through his window. For years, I'd endured his taunts while caring for our grandfather, believing James was managing the family fortune responsibly as the successful lawyer. Now, staring at these bank statements revealing James had stolen nearly everything, I realized our grandfather's legacy was almost gone. Almost. Before I share how I discovered my brother's betrayal and what happened next, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. This family drama changed my entire life, and if you've ever felt underestimated by someone who should have supported you, hit that like button. Subscribe to join our community of resilience and justice. Trust me, you'll want to see how karma finally caught up with my brother. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. Growing up in Millfield, a small town outside Boston, our family lived modestly but comfortably. I was the younger sibling by 2 years, always looking up to my brother James, who seemed to excel at everything. Our parents, Maria and Thomas Reynolds, worked incredibly hard. Mom as a school teacher and Dad managing a local hardware store. They weren't wealthy, but they made sure we never went without. James was the golden child from the beginning. While I struggled with math and science, he brought home perfect report cards. When I found my passion in art and cooking, getting B's and C's, but loving what I did, he was winning debate competitions and being courted by prestigious universities. Our parents tried their best to celebrate both our strengths. But it was clear that James was destined for greatness while I was just finding my way. Our grandfather, Elijah Reynolds, was different. While my parents saw James as the future success story, Grandpa Elijah saw something special in both of us. He had built his restaurant empire from a single diner he opened in 1965 with nothing but $200 and determination. By the time I was a teenager, he owned 5 successful diners across the state and had made some smart investments that multiplied his wealth. Sophia, he'd tell me while I helped him in the kitchen of his original diner, "James may know numbers, but you understand people. That's the real secret to business." Everything changed when I was 19. And James was 21. Our parents were driving home from an anniversary dinner when a drunk driver crossed the median. They died instantly. The grief was overwhelming, but Grandpa Elijah stepped in immediately. He moved into our family home to take care of me, while James was already away at an Ivy League law school. "Your education is your priority," Grandpa told James, continuing to pay his expensive tuition. As for me, I had just started community college studying culinary arts. After the accident, I couldn't bear the thought of leaving Grandpa alone. He insisted I continue my education, but I saw how the loss of his only child, my father, had aged him overnight. His hands shook more when counting the register. He'd forget suppliers' names he'd known for decades. I made a decision that would set my life on its course. I'd put college on part-time status and help Grandpa run the diners. "Just until you're feeling better," I told him, though we both knew better. Early signs of what would later be diagnosed as Alzheimer's were already appearing, though we didn't recognize them yet. James came home for the funeral, of course, but returned to law school within a week. "There's nothing I can do here," he said. Graduating with honors is what Mom and Dad would have wanted. Maybe he was right. Our parents had always prioritized his education and career prospects, but I couldn't shake the feeling that family should come first in times of crisis. For the next 3 years, I worked alongside Grandpa, learning every aspect of the diner business. I fell in love with the original location, Reynolds Family Diner on Main Street, with its 1,960 seconds decor loyal customers, and the feeling of home it gave everyone who walked through its doors. I learned to make Grandpa's famous apple pie with a secret ingredient he wouldn't tell anyone else. I memorized regulars' orders and the stories of their lives. This wasn't just a business. It was our family's heart and soul. Meanwhile, James graduated with honors and immediately landed a job at a prestigious Boston law firm. He visited occasionally, always with news of another case won or promotion received. He was living the high life in a downtown apartment, dating models and socialites, while I was serving coffee at 6 a.m., and helping Grandpa remember his medications. The dynamic shifted when Grandpa's health took a serious turn. At 78, he was officially diagnosed with early-stage Alzheimer's. The doctor explained he would need increasing care and supervision. That same week, James suddenly became more involved in family affairs. "You need to focus on Grandpa's care," he told me, all business in his tailored suit. "I'll handle the financial side of things. It's what I'm trained for." It made sense at the time. James had the education and connections. When he suggested that Grandpa grant him power of attorney to protect the family assets, I didn't object. Grandpa trusted James completely. His successful grandson, the lawyer, who would ensure everything he'd built would be preserved. "Your brother knows what he's doing," Grandpa assured me during a lucid moment. "I'm proud of both of you. James for his brains and you, Sophia, for your heart." I believed we were a team then. James managing the business side while I took care of Grandpa and kept the original diner running. I never imagined that my brother, my own blood, could be capable of what came next. My alarm would blare at 4:30 a.m. no matter the season or weather. While the rest of the world slept, I'd shower, pull my hair into a practical ponytail, and slip into the blue and white uniform of Reynolds Family Diner. The original location where I worked opened at 5:30 a.m. to catch the early shift workers and retirees who made up our faithful morning crowd. By 5:00 a.m., I'd be turning on the grills, starting the coffee brewers, and prepping the day's pies. Mario, our head chef who'd worked for Grandpa for 25 years, would arrive shortly after to begin breakfast preparations. The morning routine had a rhythm that brought me comfort after the chaos of losing my parents and watching my grandfather's mind slowly slip away. Morning Miss Sophia Old Tom would call as he took his usual booth by the window at 5:45 a.m. like clockwork. A retired factory foreman, he'd been having the same breakfast. 2 eggs over easy with rye toast and black coffee. Every weekday for 30 years. "Coffee's already pouring, Tom," I'd reply, sliding his cup across the table before he even sat down. By 7:30 a.m., the diner would be buzzing with its beautiful morning chaos. Linda, a paralegal at the county courthouse, grabbing her to-go coffee and bagel. The construction crew from the development across town occupying the large corner booth, their boisterous laughter filling the space. Dr. Patel stopping in for her egg white omelet before hospital rounds. These weren't just customers. They were extended family. I'd introduced several changes that had actually increased business. A seasonal menu featuring local produce student discounts that packed the place after school, and community events like the monthly Pancakes with Patriots breakfast, honoring local veterans. The diner was thriving under my management, with profits up 22% from the previous year. Around 8:15 a.m., like a dark cloud passing over the sun, James would make his appearance. Not inside the diner. No, that would be too mundane for him. He'd cruise by in his BMW X7, a vehicle so massive and gleaming it looked obscene on our small-town streets. Sometimes he'd slow down just to stare through the windows. Other times he'd actually pull into the parking lot if he spotted me serving tables near the windows. The first time it happened, I thought he was stopping in for breakfast. I even felt a flutter of happiness that he wanted to see the diner see me. Instead, he just rolled down his window and looked at me with that smirk that had become his permanent expression. "Morning, waitress." He called out loud enough for nearby customers to hear. "How's the servant life treating you today?" I forced a smile, aware of the curious glances from customers. "We're busy, James. Did you want to come in for coffee?" "God, no," he laughed, adjusting his designer sunglasses. "Some of us have real jobs to get to. Just checking that you're keeping the place presentable until we're ready to sell it." That became our routine. James flaunting his success while diminishing mine. The gleaming SUV versus my second-hand Honda. His tailored suits versus my waitress uniform. His law career versus my playing restaurant, as he called it. The mockery escalated over time. About 6 months after he gained power of attorney, James started bringing his lawyer friends to the diner occasionally. Not because they enjoyed the food, but as some sort of perverse entertainment. "This is my sister Sophia," he'd introduce me as I approached their table, not bothering to lower his voice. "She couldn't handle college, so now she's living the dream as a career waitress." His friends would chuckle uncomfortably while I took their orders, my cheeks burning with humiliation. Does she know we're meeting with developers about this location next week? I overheard one of them ask James once. She doesn't need to know the business side of things, James replied dismissively. She's happy playing house here. I confronted him in the parking lot afterward. What developers? Are you selling the diner? Relax, he said, straightening his tie. It's just preliminary discussions. Grandpa's care is getting expensive, and we need to liquidate some assets. But this diner is profitable, I argued. And it's Grandpa's first business, his legacy. He'd never want to sell it. James's expression hardened. Grandpa's not in any condition to make business decisions anymore. That's why I'm in charge of the finances. You just keep serving coffee and looking after the old man. Leave the real decisions to me. The comments grew crueler. One morning, he called me the family charity case. Another day, he asked loudly if I needed money for a real outfit since I only seemed to own that pathetic uniform. Each interaction left me more determined to prove him wrong to show that what I was doing mattered. Meanwhile, I watched James's lifestyle become increasingly lavish. The BMW upgraded to the latest model every year. The designer suits and watches. The social media posts from Aspen, the Hamptons, and the Amalfi Coast. All while claiming that Grandpa's care was getting expensive, and we needed to tighten our belts. Speaking of Grandpa, his condition had stabilized somewhat at the assisted living facility where he now resided. I visited him daily, often bringing his favorite foods from the diner. During my visits, I noticed concerning patterns. Sometimes he'd be agitated, insisting he needed to sign some papers but couldn't remember what they were for. Other times, he'd seem unusually sedated, barely able to focus on our conversations. James says I need to sign these for tax purposes, he told me one day, shuffling a stack of documents with his trembling hands. What are they exactly? I asked, trying to get a look. Before he could answer, a nurse came in with his medication, and by the time she left, he'd forgotten what we were discussing. The most painful incident came during a rare family gathering for Grandpa's 80th birthday. I'd spent days preparing all his favorite foods, decorating the private dining room at his facility, and creating a photo display of his life. James arrived an hour late, bringing a group of friends I'd never met. Sorry, we missed dinner, he announced, champagne bottle in hand. We were celebrating a big win in court. He turned to his friends. My sister can box up the leftovers, though. It's basically what she does professionally. Our cousins laughed awkwardly while I stood there humiliated once again. Later, as I served the birthday cake I'd baked from Grandpa's mother's recipe, James loudly commented, "At least being a waitress prepared you for something useful in life, sis." I nearly dropped the cake but held it together for Grandpa's sake. He was having a good day and I wouldn't let James ruin it. But as I drove home that night, tears streaming down my face, I wondered how much more of this I could take. Number 4. First signs of financial trouble. The first red flag appeared on an otherwise ordinary Tuesday. I was at the diner going through mail that had been forwarded from Grandpa's house when I noticed an overdue notice from Green Meadows, Grandpa's assisted living facility. I was confused. James handled all the bills, and Grandpa's care was supposed to be paid automatically from his accounts. I called Green Meadows immediately. I'm showing 2 months of missed payments, the billing coordinator explained. We've been trying to reach Mr. James Reynolds, but he hasn't returned our calls. If this isn't resolved by the end of the month, I'm afraid we'll have to discuss alternative arrangements. My stomach dropped. Grandpa's facility cost $5,200 per month, but with his businesses and investments, that should have been easily covered. I called James repeatedly, finally reaching him the next day. It's just a banking error, he said dismissively. I'll handle it. Don't you have tables to wait or something? A week later, I received another troubling call, this time from Mario at the diner. Sophia, the food supplier, is threatening to cut us off, he said, his voice tight with concern. They say we haven't paid invoices for 3 months. I had to use my personal credit card for today's delivery. I immediately called Edmund Wilson, the family accountant who had worked with Grandpa for decades. His response was oddly evasive. I'm not at liberty to discuss the Reynolds accounts with you, Sophia. James has instructed that all financial matters go through him. But I'm family too, I protested. And I'm managing the diner. I need to know what's happening with our suppliers. I understand your concern, Edmund replied carefully. But I have to follow the legal power of attorney. Perhaps you should speak with your brother. James continued dodging my calls, so I decided to do some investigating on my own. I started by talking to Linda, our regular customer, who worked as a paralegal. "Something doesn't sound right," she said after I explained the situation. "Even with power of attorney, your brother shouldn't be keeping you completely in the dark about family businesses, especially one you're running. Have you seen any of the financial statements lately?" I hadn't. James had taken over all the bookkeeping, claiming it was more efficient to centralize the management of all 5 diners. I only saw the daily receipts from our location. Acting on Linda's advice, I started quietly documenting everything. I created a spreadsheet of all the unpaid bills I knew about. I asked Mario and other longtime staff if they'd noticed anything unusual. The picture that emerged was troubling. The new coffee supplier, James, switched us to charges double what we used to pay, Mario told me. And the quality is worse. "He fired the maintenance company Grandpa used for 30 years, said Rita, our senior waitress. "The new guys never show up when called, but I saw their invoices. They're charging triple." Then came the bombshell. I was having coffee with Diane, who owned the flower shop across from our second diner location in Westbrook, when she mentioned it's such a shame about Reynolds closing down. That place was an institution. "What are you talking about?" I asked, my coffee cup freezing halfway to my lips. "The diner closed last month," she said, looking confused. "There's a for leases sign in the window." I assumed you knew. I drove to Westbrook immediately. Sure enough, the diner was empty, chairs stacked on tables visible through the windows, a commercial real estate sign prominently displayed. I tried my key in the door, but the locks had been changed. Shaking with anger and confusion, I called the real estate company listed on the sign. "Oh yes, the Reynolds property," the agent said cheerfully. "It sold about 3 months ago. Closed pretty quickly. All cash offer." "Sold to whom?" "I believe it was a development company. Lakeside Partners. They're planning to demolish it for a new retail space." I felt physically ill. One of our family diners sold without my knowledge. I drove to the 3rd location in Bedford, then the 4th in Lexington. Both showed the same story: closed, emptied, with real estate signs in the windows. Back at the original diner, I locked myself in Grandpa's old office and began searching desperately through the filing cabinets. Most of the important financial documents were gone, probably taken by James, but I found an old folder labeled Property Deeds that had been missed. Inside was the original deed to the Main Street diner, along with old insurance policies. I also found a business card for Howard Schmidt, Grandpa's attorney, who had helped set up the family trust years ago. I called him immediately. "Howard, this is Sophia Reynolds, Elijah's granddaughter." There was a long pause before he answered. "Sophia, I've been hoping you'd call." My conversation with Howard confirmed my worst fears. James had indeed sold 3 of the 5 family diners. He had also been withdrawing large sums from Grandpa's accounts, supposedly for business investments and medical expenses, though Howard had seen no evidence of where that money was actually going. "I've been concerned," Howard admitted. "But legally, with the power of attorney, James has the authority to make these decisions." I did suggest getting a second signature requirement added to the accounts, but he threatened to replace me as counsel if I pushed the issue. That evening, I confronted James at his luxury downtown apartment. He answered the door in a bathrobe, clearly annoyed at my unannounced visit. "What do you mean, you sold the diners?" I demanded, pushing past him into an opulently furnished living room that screamed new money. "Those weren't yours to sell." "Keep your voice down," he hissed, glancing toward the bedroom where I presumed his girlfriend was. It was a necessary business restructuring. The outlying locations weren't profitable enough. "That's a lie." "I've seen the books. They were all making money." "You've seen what exactly?" "The daily receipts. That's not the full financial picture, Sophia. There are taxes, insurance, maintenance costs, employee benefits. The math simply didn't work. And Grandpa's care facility. They're threatening to evict him because the bills aren't being paid." James sighed dramatically. "It's just a temporary cash flow issue. I've made some investments that will pay off soon." "What investments?" "Nothing you'd understand." His dismissive tone made my blood boil. This is exactly why I'm handling the finances. You don't have the education or experience for this level of business. I pressed him on the missing money, the unpaid suppliers, the sold properties. For every question, he had a condescending non-answer. According to James I, was financially illiterate, overreacting, and too emotionally attached to understand business necessities. As I left his apartment building, I noticed a brand new Porsche in the visitors' parking with a woman waiting inside. I recognized her as Melissa James's girlfriend from his Instagram photos. Suddenly, she rolled down her window. "Sophia." "Hey, I thought that was you. Is James meeting us downstairs?" "Us?" I asked. "For Barbados," she said like it should be obvious. "The private jet leaves in 2 hours. 2 weeks at that amazing villa his company owns." He said he's just grabbing his passport. Private jet company villa. Something was very, very wrong. I had gone to James's apartment looking for answers, but left with even more questions, and a growing sense of dread about what my brother might really be doing with our family's money. It was just past midnight when I finished closing the diner. My feet ached from the 12-hour shift, but my mind was too wired for sleep. For weeks, I'd been gathering scraps of information, trying to piece together what James was doing with our family's assets, but I still didn't have the full picture. I was emptying the mailbox when I noticed an envelope that didn't belong there. The address label read James Reynolds at his downtown apartment, but it had been mistakenly delivered to the diner. The sender was Grand Cayman National Bank. I shouldn't have opened it. Legally and morally, I knew that. But with Grandpa's care at stake and 3 family businesses already mysteriously sold, I tore into the envelope. Inside was a monthly statement for an offshore account I never knew existed. The balance, $2.4 million. My hands trembled so badly I had to sit down. The statement showed regular transfers from Reynolds Family Holdings, the company that owned all Grandpa's businesses and investments. Transfers that had accelerated in the past 6 months. The most recent deposit, just 2 weeks ago, was for $340,000, exactly matching the sale price of the Lexington diner according to the county records I'd looked up. I felt physically sick. All those times James claimed money was tight while I watched Grandpa's care deteriorate. All those times I worked double shifts to help keep the original diner afloat while he jetted around the world. It had all been a lie. My own brother was systematically stealing our grandfather's life's work. The next morning, I called in sick to the diner for the first time in 3 years and drove to Howard Schmidt's law office with the bank statement in hand. I suspected something like this, Howard admitted after examining the document. But suspicion isn't proof, and with the power of attorney, I was limited in what I could do. "So, what can we do now?" I asked desperately. Howard removed his glasses, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "This is evidence of potential fraud and elder abuse. But we need more than just this statement. We need to prove that James has been acting against Elijah's wishes and best interests." I spent the next week in a frenzy of investigation. Howard helped me obtain court records showing that 3 of the 5 diners had indeed been sold in the past year, with the original diner currently under contract to sell the following month. The records showed signatures from both James and supposedly Grandpa, but I knew Grandpa couldn't possibly have understood what he was signing, given his condition. I confronted Edmund Wilson, the accountant, armed with what I knew. After initial resistance, he finally cracked. "He said he'd ruin me," Edmund confessed, shame evident in his voice. "I've known your grandfather for 40 years, but James threatened to report me for tax irregularities if I didn't cooperate. He falsified some of the documentation I'd prepared." With Edmund's reluctant cooperation, I gained access to the full financial records. What I discovered was devastating. Nearly 80% of Grandpa's $4.2 million estate had been systematically drained over the past 3 years. Properties sold at below-market rates to shell companies that James secretly controlled. Massive management fees paid to James personally. Valuable collectibles and artwork from Grandpa's house mysteriously donated or missing entirely. Most disturbing was what I found when I visited Grandpa with Dr. Morris, his longtime physician who agreed to review his medical records. "His medication levels are concerning," Dr. Morris said after examining the charts. "He's being prescribed nearly double the appropriate dose of his sedatives. No wonder you've reported he seems confused during your visits. Could it be a mistake? I asked, not wanting to believe the implication. The prescriptions are all properly signed by the staff doctor, he replied grimly. But these dosages would keep Elijah in a perpetual fog, unable to ask questions or comprehend complex information. Like legal documents selling off his life's work. I installed a small camera in Grandpa's room, with Howard's help making sure it was legal, as he still had the right to consent to such monitoring for his own protection during his lucid periods. Within 3 days, we caught James removing papers from Grandpa's room after a signing session, where Grandpa was clearly disoriented and barely conscious. The final piece fell into place when I discovered, hidden in the false bottom of an old filing cabinet at the diner, Grandpa's original will. It specified that the diners were to be divided equally between James and me, with the original location specifically left in my care as Grandpa knew how much it meant to me. But James had submitted a different will to the probate court, one that left everything to him with a small stipend for me as long as I remained employed at the family business. A business he was in the process of selling out from under me. With shaking hands, I laid out all the evidence on the table in front of me. Bank statements showing millions diverted to offshore accounts, property records of businesses sold without proper authorization, medical records showing inappropriate medication, and the falsified will. The extent of my brother's betrayal was breathtaking. This wasn't just financial mismanagement or taking advantage. This was calculated, methodical theft from the man who had raised us, who was now vulnerable and unable to defend himself. I sat in the empty diner that night, surrounded by the evidence of James's treachery, and I cried until I had no tears left. Then I made a pot of coffee, reached for the phone, and called Linda. I have everything I need, I told her. Now I need to know what to do with it. If you've ever discovered someone you trusted completely had betrayed you, you know that hollow feeling in your chest. The moment when disbelief turns to certainty and you realize nothing will ever be the same. As I looked at the proof of James's betrayal spread across that diner table, I knew I wasn't just fighting for Grandpa's legacy anymore. I was fighting for justice. And I was just getting started. Have you ever had that moment of clarity, when you realize someone close to you isn't who you thought they were? Let me know in the comments and stay with me to see how I confronted the brother, who thought I was just a waitress, wouldn't fight back. I decided to confront James directly before taking legal action. Perhaps naively, I thought he might confess, show remorse, agree to return what he'd stolen. I wanted to give my brother, my only immediate family besides Grandpa, one chance to do the right thing. I met him at his condo building, evidence folder tucked under my arm. The doorman nearly didn't let me up, but I convinced him by mentioning I was James's sister with urgent family business. James answered his door in designer loungewear, scotch in hand. His initial expression of annoyance shifted to wariness when he saw my face. "What's wrong with Grandpa?" he asked immediately. "Grandpa's the same as he was when you saw him 3 weeks ago," I replied coldly. Though he'd probably be better if he wasn't being over-medicated to sign away his life's work. James's face hardened. "I don't know what you're talking about." I pulled out the Cayman Bank statement. $2.4 million, James. That's what Grandpa's legacy is worth to you. He snatched the paper from my hand. "You went through my mail. That's a federal offense. So is fraud, elder abuse, and embezzlement." For a moment, James looked genuinely rattled. Then he composed himself, motioning me inside with exaggerated politeness. I remained standing as he poured himself more scotch. "You're clearly upset," he said in the condescending tone I'd grown to hate. "But you don't understand the complexities of managing Grandpa's estate." "I understand perfectly. You've stolen nearly everything." "I haven't stolen anything," he snapped. "Every transaction has been legal and documented. I have power of attorney. The investments I've made with the family assets will ultimately benefit everyone. Investments like your Porsche, your Barbados villa. The offshore accounts?" His eyes narrowed. "You've been investigating me." "Someone had to. Grandpa can't." James swirled his scotch, then set it down with a decisive click. When he looked up, his expression had changed. The mask of the caring grandson and brother had completely fallen away. "He doesn't even remember what he owns anyway," James said coldly. What difference does it make if I use the money now instead of waiting for him to die? The callousness stunned me. He trusted you. We both did. And that was your mistake. James walked to his window, gazing out at the city skyline he'd purchased with our grandfather's money. Look, Sophia, let's be practical. Grandpa built his business for us to enjoy, not to preserve as some kind of shrine. I'm just being efficient about it. By stealing everything and leaving him in a care facility that's threatening to evict him. James turned back to me with a calculating look. I'll tell you what. I recognize you've worked hard at the diner. When the sale closes next month, I can give you a small settlement. Say $50,000. You can start fresh somewhere, maybe finally finish that community college degree. I stared at him in disbelief. You think you can buy me off with crumbs from what you've stolen? I think $50,000 is generous for a waitress with no leverage. His voice was cold. Take it or leave it. I'll leave it. And I'll be taking everything I've discovered to the district attorney. For the first time, I saw a flicker of concern cross his face. Then he laughed, but it didn't reach his eyes. No one will believe you, Sophia. Who do you think they'll trust? A Harvard-educated attorney with documented power of attorney, or a waitress with a high school diploma who's clearly jealous of her successful brother? I have the legal system on my side. We'll see about that. As I turned to leave, James called after me. If you pursue this, it won't end well for you. I can make things very difficult. No one will rent to you. No one will hire you. Think carefully about your next move. I paused at the door. You know what the difference is between us. James' grandpa taught me that success isn't about what you take. It's about what you give back. You might have forgotten that lesson, but I haven't. The next day, I received a certified letter from James's law firm ordering me to cease and desist from defamatory claims and threatening legal action if I continued investigating his financial activities. I took the letter straight to Howard Schmidt. He's getting nervous, Howard observed. That's good. But he's right about one thing. With his resources and connections, this won't be easy. I had underestimated how quickly James would escalate. Within days, I received notice that I was being investigated for potential elder abuse. James had filed a complaint suggesting I was the one taking advantage of Grandpa, using my daily visits to manipulate him. Then came the most painful blow. When I arrived at Green Meadows to visit Grandpa, the receptionist looked uncomfortable. I'm sorry, Miss Reynolds, but we have instructions not to allow you visitation rights. What from whom? Your brother has submitted documentation stating you've been agitating your grandfather and affecting his health. The director had no choice but to temporarily suspend your visiting privileges pending review. I stood there in shock, clutching the small photo album I'd brought to share with Grandpa. He can't do that. I'm Grandpa's caretaker. Actually, legally, Mr. James Reynolds is listed as the primary caretaker with medical power of attorney. I'm very sorry. I called every day that week, begging to speak to Grandpa. The staff was sympathetic but bound by the legal directives. I even tried sneaking in through a side door but was caught by security. Meanwhile, I continued gathering evidence with Howard's help. We scheduled an emergency hearing with a judge to challenge the power of attorney based on the evidence of fraud and manipulation. 2 days before the hearing, I arrived at the diner to find the locks changed and a legal notice taped to the door declaring I was prohibited from entering the premises as I was no longer employed by Reynolds Holdings Incorporated. Mario and the staff were standing in the parking lot, confused and angry. He came with security guards. Mario told me furious. Said the diner was closed for renovation and everyone's final checks would be mailed. When I asked about you, he said you'd been terminated for theft. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Theft. Nobody believed it, Rita assured me, patting my arm. We all know you've been keeping this place alive while he's been running everything else into the ground. That night, I hit rock bottom. I had lost access to Grandpa, my job, and the diner that was my second home. I slept in my car, afraid to return to the apartment I rented from a family friend who might have also received legal threats from James. The next morning, my phone rang. It was Aunt Margaret, my mother's sister, who lived in Vermont. We weren't particularly close. She and my mother had drifted apart years ago, but she'd always been kind during her infrequent visits. Sophia, your friend Linda, found my number. She said you're in trouble. I broke down telling her everything. When I finished, there was a long silence. "Your mother would be heartbroken to see what James has become," she finally said. "Come stay with me. We'll figure this out together." That evening, as I was packing the few belongings from my apartment, I received a text from Mario boss. "You need to get to the diner now. James is here with some men in suits. They're talking about demolition plans." I drove there immediately. Through the windows, I could see James hosting what looked like a victory dinner for a group of developers. A large blueprint was spread across the tables they'd pushed together. The very tables where families had gathered for decades, where Grandpa had built his dream. I watched from the kitchen doorway, having convinced the night cleaner to let me in the back. James was holding quart champagne glass in hand. "We'll break ground next month," he was saying, gesturing to the blueprint. "The old place will be demolished, and the new retail complex will be completed within a year. Prime location guaranteed, tenants already lined up." "What about the Historical Preservation Committee?" one man asked. "I heard they were interested in this building." James laughed dismissively. "Already handled. My firm specializes in navigating these small-town bureaucracies. And your grandfather, I understood he was quite attached to this location." James's smile never faltered. "My grandfather is unfortunately suffering from advanced dementia and is no longer able to make business decisions. As his legal representative, I'm acting in the family's best financial interest. And your sister, I heard she was running this location. A temporary arrangement while we prepared for this transition. She's been fairly compensated." I'd heard enough. Shaking with rage, I slipped back out the way I'd come. James wasn't just stealing from us. He was erasing our family's history. Grandpa's legacy as if it meant nothing. In the parking lot, I bumped into Rita, who had come to retrieve a forgotten purse. Seeing my expression, she pulled me into a fierce hug. "We're with you, boss," she whispered. "Whatever you need to fight this, just say the word." As I drove to Aunt Margaret's that night, a strange calm replaced my despair. James thought he'd won, that I'd give up and disappear. But he had forgotten something important about me. Something Grandpa had recognized years ago when he trusted me with his first diner. I might be just a waitress in James's eyes, but working in that diner had taught me resilience, resourcefulness, and how to handle difficult people. James had money connections and legal expertise on his side. But I had the truth, and I was just getting started. "We need to build an airtight case," Aunt Margaret said the next morning, over breakfast at her cozy Vermont farmhouse. A retired high school principal, she approached problems with methodical precision. "James has resources and connections, but he's left a trail. We just need to follow it." I nodded, grateful for her clear-headed approach. "Howard has the financial evidence, but James will claim he had legal authority to make those decisions." "Then we need to prove he obtained that authority fraudulently," she replied. "And we need more allies." My phone buzzed with a text from Mario. "The staff wants to help. We're meeting at my place tonight. Can you join?" That evening, in Mario's crowded living room, I faced the assembled staff of Reynolds Family Diner. 17 people who had just lost their jobs because of my brother's greed. "I can't promise we'll win," I told them honestly. "And I understand if you need to find other jobs immediately." "We're family," Rita declared, the other waitresses nodding in agreement. "Elijah gave me a job when no one else would hire a single mother with no experience. I'm not abandoning his legacy now." Mario stepped forward. "I've been keeping records," he said, pulling out a worn leather ledger. "Your grandfather taught me to document everything. For 25 years, I've recorded every business decision, every unusual expense, every conversation about the future of the diners." The ledger was a goldmine. Mario had meticulously noted James's increasingly questionable decisions, including entries like, March 15, JR switched meat supplier from Peterson's 25 years to Discount Foods. Quality down, price up 22%. ER would never approve. April 3, JR sold kitchen equipment from Westbrook location at 30% market value to company called Premier Restaurant Supply. Research shows Premier owned by JR college roommate. The next day, I received a call from Linda, the paralegal who frequented our diner. "Sophia, I spoke with my boss about your situation. He's interested in meeting you. Her boss turned out to be Caitlin Davis, a former college friend who now worked at the district attorney's office specializing in elder fraud cases. Linda's told me the outline, Caitlin said when we met. But I need to see everything you have. I spread out the evidence we'd gathered. Bank statements, property records, Mario's ledger medical reports on Grandpa's over-medication, the falsified will. This is compelling, Caitlin acknowledged. But James will have explanations for everything. We need something he can't explain away. Like what? Ideally, proof that he never actually passed the bar exam. I stared at her. What? Caitlin looked uncomfortable. It might be nothing, but when Linda mentioned your brother's name, something clicked. There was a scandal a few years back. Someone from Harvard who supposedly passed the bar, but actually had someone else take it for them. The investigation was dropped when the witness recanted, but she shrugged. Your brother's firm handles high-profile cases. It might be worth looking into his credentials. This sent me down a new investigative path. With Caitlin's help, I requested verification of James's bar admission and discovered a disturbing discrepancy. The photo ID used for his bar exam didn't quite match his driver's license photo. More allies emerged. The night manager from our Lexington location revealed he'd overheard James discussing cooking the books with an associate over dinner. A bank teller who had processed several large transfers came forward after reading about elder fraud cases similar to ours. But our biggest break came from an unexpected source. James's girlfriend, Melissa, contacted me through Linda. We need to meet, her message read. Not at your place or mine. Somewhere public. We met at a coffee shop in a neighboring town. Melissa looked nervous, continuously checking her surroundings. James and I broke up, she explained without preamble. I found things on his laptop. Screenshots of conversations with someone named Frank about forging signatures. Emails about offshore accounts and shell companies. Plans for selling all the properties, including your grandfather's house. Do you still have access to these? I asked, trying to contain my excitement. She pulled out a flash drive. I copied everything before I left. He doesn't know I have it. The files on the drive were damning. Emails explicitly discussing how to manipulate Grandpa's medication schedule to ensure he was most compliant during document signings. Conversations with doctors being paid to prescribe unnecessary medications. A complete financial blueprint showing how James had moved assets through various shell companies to hide the paper trail. Most shocking was an email to a care facility in a neighboring state, a state-run minimum standard nursing home, discussing transferring Grandpa there to reduce costs once the original diner was sold. Armed with this new evidence, Howard filed emergency petitions to revoke James's power of attorney and to grant me temporary guardianship of Grandpa. The judge, alarmed by the evidence, scheduled an emergency hearing for the following day. I was finally allowed to see Grandpa. He was more lucid than he had been in months. James was no longer controlling his medication. Sophia, he said, recognizing me immediately. They said you stopped coming. I never stopped trying to visit you, I assured him, taking his hand. James prevented me from seeing you. A shadow crossed his face. James. He's been having me sign papers. So many papers. I try to understand them, but the words swim on the page. I know, Grandpa. We're going to fix everything. His eyes filled with tears. The original diner. He's selling it, isn't he? I remember signing something. I thought it was just renovations. We're going to stop the sale, I promised. We're going to save everything you built. The day before the hearing, I received a panicked call from Mario. They're coming tomorrow, he said breathlessly. I just heard from my cousin who works for the demolition company. They're scheduled to start clearing out the diner at 8 a.m. before the court hearing at 10. They're going to present the judge with a fait accompli. I called Howard immediately. He filed for an emergency injunction, but we couldn't get a judge to sign it until morning. Possibly too late. We need to physically prevent them from entering, I decided. We need everyone at the diner by 7 a.m. Word spread quickly. By 6:30 a.m., a crowd had gathered outside Reynolds' family diner. Staff, regular customers, community members who'd heard what was happening. Local news had picked up the story of the family drama and pending court case, and a reporter and cameraman were positioned across the street. At 7:45 a.m., James arrived with a demolition crew, a moving truck, and 2 security guards. His face darkened when he saw the crowd. "This is private property," he announced, striding toward me. "Everyone needs to disperse immediately." "It's not your property yet," I countered. "The court will decide that today." "These people are trespassing," he told the police officer, who had arrived to monitor the situation. "Actually," the officer replied, consulting his notes, "I have record that this property is still owned by Reynolds Family Holdings, and Miss Sophia Reynolds is a legal representative of that entity until the court determines otherwise this morning." James's face contorted with rage. "This is ridiculous. I have contracts to fulfill." "Then I guess we'll see you in court," I said calmly. As James stormed back to his BMW, Rita stepped forward with a small paper bag. "Your usual breakfast order, Mr. Reynolds," she called after him. "On the house. You might want to eat something before the judge sees all that evidence we've gathered." The look on James's face as he realized how much trouble he was in, that was the moment I knew we had him. With the immediate threat to the diner averted, we raced to the courthouse for the emergency hearing. James was already there with his legal team. 3 attorneys from his firm, all in expensive suits, projecting confidence. I had Howard Schmidt, Aunt Margaret, and the truth. The hearing went better than expected. Judge Harriet Chen, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, reviewed our evidence with a deepening frown. When James's attorney attempted to dismiss Mario's ledger as the scribblings of a disgruntled employee, she cut him off. "These records appear meticulous and consistent over many years," she observed, "and they're corroborated by the financial documents and property records." She granted my petition for temporary guardianship of Grandpa and suspended James's power of attorney pending a full investigation. Most importantly, she issued a restraining order preventing any sale or modification of the remaining family properties. It was a victory, but a temporary one. James's legal team immediately filed counteractions, and we were scheduled for a full hearing in 3 weeks. During that time, the DA's office would be investigating the allegations of fraud and elder abuse. "He'll be desperate now," Howard warned as we left the courthouse. "He knows what's coming if this goes to trial. Be careful." Back at Aunt Margaret's farmhouse, we assembled our core team: Howard Caitlin from the DA's office, Mario Linda, and a surprise addition, James's former law school classmate, Nathan Parker, who now specialized in financial crimes. "James and I weren't friends," Nathan explained. "In fact, he made my life hell. Let's just say I've been waiting for an opportunity to see justice catch up with him." "We have 3 weeks to build an airtight case," Howard said. "James will use every trick and connection he has." "Then we need to be smarter," I replied. "We need to set a trap he can't escape." Our plan took shape over the next few days. With Caitlin's guidance, we documented every remaining asset and exactly where the stolen money had gone. Nathan examined James's bar exam records more closely and confirmed our suspicions. The handwriting on the exam didn't match James's handwriting on other legal documents. Mario and the diner staff reopened the original location, working for free until we could sort out the finances. Regular customers flocked back, many bringing new friends after hearing about our situation on the local news. We created a social media campaign sharing the story of Grandpa's legacy and how it was being threatened. The community response was overwhelming. People shared memories of celebrations at the diner, first dates, family traditions. The Reynolds name, thanks to Grandpa's decades of community service, still meant something to people. I visited Grandpa daily now that the court had removed James's restrictions. On his good days, he helped us remember details about property purchases and business decisions that proved crucial to our case. I never wanted to sell any of the diners, he confirmed during a recorded statement with his doctor and Howard present. "I built them for the community and for my grandchildren to share equally." Meanwhile, we set our trap. Through carefully planted information via staff we suspected were reporting to James, we leaked that I was considering a settlement offer, that I was overwhelmed by the legal complexities and just wanted my fair share. The bait worked. James' lawyer contacted Howard with a settlement proposal, a slightly improved offer from James's original $50,000, now up to $100,000 for me to walk away from all claims. He's testing the waters, Nathan observed. He wants to see if you'll negotiate. Through Howard, we countered with a request for more details about the family holdings to properly evaluate the offer. The document James's team sent in response was a goldmine of admissions. It listed properties and accounts we hadn't even known about, apparently believing we'd be impressed by the total value rather than realizing he was confessing to hiding even more assets. But the centerpiece of our trap was the diner itself. We created a fake emergency sale scenario spreading word through town that a developer was making a time-limited all-cash offer that I was considering to cover legal expenses. James won't be able to resist the opportunity to close that deal himself, Nathan predicted. His ego won't let you sell what he considers his property. Sure enough, James reached out directly for the first time since our confrontation. I heard about the developer's offer, he said, his tone falsely casual. I think we can work together on this. The family should present a united front for negotiations. I'm listening, I replied, following our script. Let's meet at the diner. Tomorrow night after closing. Bring your lawyer if you want, I'll bring mine. We'll find a compromise that works for everyone. As he hung up, I looked around at my team and nodded. He took the bait. We had one day to prepare. Every detail had to be perfect. The developer, actually Nathan's brother-in-law, would arrive with convincing paperwork and a briefcase full of cash as a good faith deposit. Hidden recording devices were placed throughout the diner. Caitlin arranged for plainclothes officers to be stationed nearby. Most importantly, we prepared for every possible move James might make. We anticipated his arguments, his offers, his threats. We role-played various scenarios until we were ready for anything he might throw at us. Remember, Howard cautioned as we made final preparations, James is desperate and cornered. That makes him dangerous. Stick to the plan. That night, I barely slept. The next day passed in a blur of last-minute preparations. By closing time, everything was in place. The staff left, ostensibly closing for the night, but actually gathering at Mario's to monitor the recording feeds. Our fake developer arrived and took his position. Howard and I sat at Grandpa's favorite booth waiting. At exactly 9 p.m., James arrived, but not alone. He had brought 2 attorneys and a man I recognized as the actual developer who'd been at the diner that night with the demolition plans. Sophia James greeted me with a plastic smile. I think we can resolve this unfortunate situation tonight. As they settled into the booth across from us, I felt a moment of doubt. Had we underestimated James again? Was he somehow one step ahead? But then I remembered everything he'd done. The stolen money, the lies, the cruelty toward Grandpa. I remembered my promise to save what our grandfather had built, and I knew that this time I was ready. Let's talk, I said, meeting my brother's gaze steadily. I'm all ears. The diner was eerily quiet as James settled into the booth, his expensive suit a stark contrast to the vintage 1960s decor. His 2 attorneys flanked him like bodyguards, while the developer, Peterson from Lakeside Partners, stood awkwardly nearby. You've caused quite a scene, James began, his tone condescending. But I'm willing to be generous. Let's put all this unpleasantness behind us. That's why I'm here, I replied, following our script perfectly. I just want what's fair. James relaxed, slightly mistaking my calm for capitulation. $200,000. That's my final offer. More than fair considering your contributions. Howard shifted beside me, playing his role as the cautious attorney. My client deserves a full accounting of the estate before considering any offer. James waved dismissively. The estate is complicated. Multiple corporate entities, investments. Things a waitress wouldn't understand. He slid a document across the table. This release states Sophia accepts the settlement and drops all claims regarding Elijah Reynolds' estate and businesses. Sign it and the money is yours tonight. I pretended to consider it, watching James's face. The contempt in his eyes was unmistakable. He truly believed I would give up everything for a fraction of what he'd stolen. Before I decide, I said carefully I'd like to understand the developer's offer for this property. Since it's still technically family-owned, Peterson stepped forward eagerly. We're prepared to offer $2 million for the location all cash. Premium price because we need to close quickly. $2 million. I feigned surprise looking at James. But you told me the diner was barely breaking even. A flash of annoyance crossed James's face. Market values change, property appreciated. Lucky timing, I observed. Right before I got temporary control of the assets. The door chimed, and our fake developer entered right on cue. Miss Reynolds Richard Donovan, from Summit Development. Sorry I'm late. James stood abruptly. What is this? My potential buyer, I explained innocently. You brought yours, I brought mine. There's already a contract with Lakeside. James snapped. Signed by you with a fraudulent power of attorney, Howard interjected. Judge Chen invalidated it yesterday. James's face darkened. This is ridiculous. Peterson, wait outside. As Peterson left looking confused, I continued my performance. 2 competing offers might drive up the price, unless... I leaned forward. Unless you want to explain exactly how much of Grandpa's money you've already taken. I haven't taken anything, James hissed, his composed facade cracking. Every transaction was legal. Legal, I slid Mario's ledger across the table, like switching suppliers to companies you secretly owned. Or selling equipment at 30% of value to your college roommate. His attorney placed a warning hand on his arm, but James shook it off. Prove it. You can't prove intent. Actually, I said, pulling out a folder, Melissa provided some interesting emails. Detailed plans for draining Grandpa's accounts, discussions about forging his signature, even your schedule for overmedication to keep him compliant. James's face went pale. She wouldn't dare. She did. Along with evidence, you never actually passed the bar exam. That hit a nerve. James half rose from his seat, face contorted with rage. You stupid waitress. You think you can outsmart me. I made this family. While you were playing house in this pathetic diner, I built connections, created wealth. Grandpa was nothing but a small-time cook until I took over. Is that how you justify stealing from him? I asked quietly. From the man who paid for your education, who trusted you to protect his legacy. Legacy? James laughed bitterly. A chain of greasy spoons. I gave him a legacy. I turned his pennies into millions, which you then stole. I earned it, James shouted, losing all composure. Do you have any idea how hard I've worked? Pretending to be a lawyer, managing those offshore accounts. Keeping the old man medicated enough to sign, but not enough to raise suspicions. That takes skill, Sophia. Skills you couldn't begin to understand. The diner fell silent. James's attorneys stared at him in horror. Our fake developer, actually wearing a wire, stood motionless. Did you just admit to practicing law without a license? Howard asked mildly. And drugging your grandfather to steal his assets? The blood drained from James's face as he realized what he'd done. That's not, I meant. The front door opened again, and Caitlin walked in with 2 police officers and a court reporter. James Reynolds. Caitlin said formally. I'm Assistant District Attorney Caitlin Davis. These officers have a warrant for your arrest on charges of elder abuse, fraud, practicing law without a license, and embezzlement. Everything you've said has been recorded and witnessed. James lunged toward the back door, but found it blocked by 2 more officers. As they handcuffed him, reading his rights, he fixed me with a look of pure hatred. You planned this, he spat. You trapped me. I learned from Grandpa, I replied calmly. He always said the best way to catch a rat is to know exactly what cheese it can't resist. As the officers led James away, his attorneys quickly distanced themselves, one of them already on the phone reporting to their firm. The fake developer revealed himself as an investigator from the DA's office, and the court reporter confirmed she had documented everything. The next few weeks passed in a blur of legal proceedings. James's firm disavowed all knowledge of his fraudulent credentials and cooperated fully with investigations. The State Bar Association launched a probe into how he had managed to practice without a license for years. Financial forensics traced most of the stolen money, though some had been spent on James's lavish lifestyle. The media coverage was extensive. Fake lawyer defrauds grandfather and diner dynasty betrayal made headlines across the state. Former clients of James came forward with stories of questionable practices, and his entire legal career began unraveling. The most satisfying moment came during sentencing. Judge Chen, who had presided over our original emergency hearing, delivered a scathing condemnation. Mr. Reynolds, you have betrayed the most sacred of trusts, that between family members. You exploited your grandfather's vulnerability and your sister's good faith. You stole not just money but dignity and security from the very people who supported your success. The court sentences you to 8 years in prison for fraud and elder abuse, with additional sentences for practicing law without a license and embezzlement to be served consecutively. As James was led away in handcuffs, he finally looked broken. Not the arrogant man who had mocked me from his luxury SUV, but someone facing the consequences of his actions at last. Outside the courthouse, reporters asked how I felt about the verdict. This was never about winning against my brother, I told them honestly. It was about protecting my grandfather's legacy and the family business he built through decades of hard work. No one has the right to steal that, no matter how entitled they feel. Later that day, I drove to Green Meadows to share the news with Grandpa. He was having one of his good days, alert and present in a way he hadn't been while over-medicated under James's instructions. "So it's over?" he asked after I explained the verdict. "Yes, Grandpa. The court appointed me as your guardian and trustee of the estate. We've already recovered most of the money and stopped the sale of the remaining properties." He nodded slowly, his eyes filling with tears. "And James? He'll be in prison for a long time." Grandpa looked out the window, his expression mournful. 2 grandchildren. One who would steal everything I built. Another who risked everything to save it. Where did we go wrong with him, Sophia? I took his hand, its papery skin and blue veins, reminding me of his mortality, of everything we'd nearly lost. "We didn't, Grandpa. James made his choices. But we're going to be okay." He squeezed my hand weakly. "The diner? Still there. Still serving your famous apple pie. And it's going to stay that way." A smile crossed his weathered face. "You know, I always knew you were the one who understood what I was building. Not just restaurants, but community. Places where people belong." As I drove home that evening, I passed the spot where James used to idle in his luxury SUV, watching me work through the diner windows. The space was empty now, but I felt no satisfaction in his downfall. Only relief that justice had been served and our family's legacy preserved. The diner lights glowed warmly ahead, beckoning me home. Inside, Mario was training new staff to replace those who'd found other jobs during the closure. Rita was serving coffee to a booth of regulars who had stood with us that morning against the demolition crew. This wasn't just a victory over James. It was a reclamation of everything that mattered. Not just the buildings and businesses, but the values they represented. Honesty, hard work, community. The very things James had discarded in his pursuit of wealth and status. As I tied on my apron for the evening shift, I smiled at the thought that in the end, it wasn't the lawyer who saved our family legacy, but the waitress who refused to give up on what really mattered. 1 year later, I sat across from Grandpa in our renovated family diner, watching him enjoy his favorite breakfast, blueberry pancakes with extra butter. At 81, his Alzheimer's had neither progressed nor improved significantly since we'd stabilized his medication. He had good days and bad days, but today was definitely a good one. "Did you change the recipe?" he asked, pointing at his pancakes with his fork. "Just a touch more buttermilk," I admitted. Mario's suggestion. He nodded approvingly. Smart man, Mario. Always said he had good instincts. The diner buzzed with morning activity around us. After reopening last year, business had boomed, partly from community support following our widely publicized family drama, but also from the improvements we'd implemented. The vintage 1,960 seconds aesthetic had been preserved but refreshed. The menu featured both Grandpa's classics and new farm-to-table options I'd developed with local suppliers. The legal aftermath of James' crimes had been complicated and time-consuming. With Caitlin and Howard's help, we'd recovered about 60% of the stolen assets. Some money was simply gone, spent on James's lavish lifestyle or tied up in failed investments he'd made trying to generate quick returns. We'd managed to buy back 2 of the 3 sold diners, negotiating with the new owners, who were sympathetic to our situation. The third had already been demolished, but we used the recovery funds to open a new location in a neighboring town that had been requesting a Reynolds diner for years. The wall behind Grandpa's regular booth now featured a family legacy display. Photographs of him opening the first diner in 1965 newspaper clippings about his community service over the decades. And yes, a small framed article about James's conviction. I hadn't wanted to include it, but Grandpa had insisted. Family history isn't just the good parts, he'd said. The hard lessons matter too. James was serving his sentence at a medium-security prison upstate. He'd written letters, first angry and accusatory, then increasingly desperate as the reality of his situation sank in. His most recent letter had included what seemed like a genuine apology, though I wasn't ready to respond yet. Forgiveness might come someday, but trust would take much longer. Miss Sophia, a young voice, interrupted my thoughts as Tommy Linda's 7-year-old son bounded up to our table. Mom says to tell you we need more chocolate milk at the counter. Duty calls, I told Grandpa with a smile rising from the booth. That's my girl, he replied proudly. Always taking care of business. As I refilled the chocolate milk dispenser, I glanced around at what we'd rebuilt from the ashes of James's betrayal. Mario was in the kitchen training 2 culinary students from the community college, where I now taught a business class one evening a week. Rita was chatting with her regular customers, many of whom had been coming for decades. The past year had transformed more than just our business. I'd completed my business degree online while managing the diners, graduating with honors last month. Grandpa had been there in the front row, beaming with pride, despite his confusion about the occasion. I'd also started a local support group for families dealing with elder exploitation, sharing our story and connecting people with resources. The experience had shown me how common financial elder abuse was, and how rarely perpetrators were held accountable. My phone buzzed with a text from Aunt Margaret, who had become a permanent part of our lives after providing sanctuary during my lowest moment, just past James's condo building. For sale, sign is up. Thought you should know. I felt a strange pang at this final dismantling of my brother's former life. The luxury condo had been seized as part of the restitution order, the proceeds to be returned to Grandpa's estate. It was justice, but still carried the bitterness of family bonds broken beyond repair. The bell above the door chimed, and I looked up to see Caitlin entering with a folder under her arm. Good news, she announced, settling at the counter. The court approved your foundation proposal. The Reynolds Family Legacy Foundation is officially a non-profit organization. This had been my most meaningful project, transforming a portion of the recovered assets into a foundation that would provide culinary scholarships and small business grants to people who, like Grandpa, had dreams bigger than their bank accounts. The first 3 grants had already been awarded to promising local entrepreneurs. That's wonderful, I replied, pouring her usual coffee. Grandpa will be thrilled. How is he today? She asked, nodding toward his booth where he was now chatting with a young family. One of his good days. He remembered the pancake recipe this morning. After Caitlin left, I made my rounds through the diner, chatting with customers and clearing tables when needed. Despite our improved financial situation and my official title as CEO of Reynolds Family Diners, I still worked regular shifts. The connections with customers and staff kept me grounded in what really mattered. Around noon, the mail arrived, including a letter from the prison. I recognized James's handwriting immediately, but set it aside for later. Whatever he had to say could wait until after the lunch rush. The afternoon lull found me back in Grandpa's office. Now my office, reviewing applications for our next round of foundation grants. A framed photo on the desk showed 4 generations of Reynolds family members at the diner's 50th anniversary celebration, taken shortly before my parents' accident. James stood beside me in the photo, his arm around my shoulders, both of us smiling. Sometimes I still wondered when things had changed for him. When ambition had twisted into greed, when family loyalty had given way to exploitation. Had the seeds always been there, or had something gone wrong along the way? These questions had no answers, at least none that would heal the hurt. I opened James's letter, finally bracing myself for whatever manipulation or self-pity it might contain. Instead, I found something unexpected. A handwritten journal of family recipes he remembered from childhood, meticulously documented with notes about which diner had featured each one and when. Grandpa's famous apple pie, Mom's summer berry cobbler, even my experimental cinnamon roll pancakes that had become a weekend special. The final page held no recipe, just a simple message. I lost sight of what made our family special. It was never about the money, it was this. The food that brought people together, the places Dad and Mom took us to celebrate, good news the booths, where Grandpa taught us both to count change and greet customers. I threw it all away for nothing that mattered. I'm sorry, Sophia. Not asking for forgiveness. Just wanted you to know I finally understand what you were protecting all along. Tears blurred my vision as I closed the letter. It wasn't redemption, that would take years of genuine change. But it was something. A recognition of the values I'd fought for, the legacy that had always been about more than property and profits. That evening, as closing time approached, I found Grandpa dozing in his booth, the newspaper crossword half completed before him. I gently touched his shoulder. Ready to head home, Grandpa. He blinked awake, momentarily confused, before recognition dawned. Sophia, is it that time already? Just about. Mario's boxing up some dinner for us to take back to your place. As I helped him with his coat, he paused, looking around the diner with surprising clarity. You know, he said softly, I built all this, hoping it would bring our family together someday. I never imagined it would tear us apart first. Not all of us, I corrected gently. You and me. We're still here. He patted my hand, his eyes suddenly bright with unshed tears. You're the heart of this family, Sophia. Always have been. James had the head for business, but you have the heart. Can't run a place like this without heart. We walked slowly to my car, which was parked where James used to idle in his luxury SUV. As we pulled away from the diner, its neon sign glowing warmly against the evening sky, I thought about the strange circular journey of the past year. How losing almost everything had revealed what truly mattered. How the diner that James had mocked me for managing had ultimately saved our family's legacy. Grandpa, I said as we waited at a red light, do you remember what you used to tell us when we were kids? About success. He thought for a moment, then smiled. Success isn't what you take from the world. It's what you give back to it. Exactly. I reached over to squeeze his hand. I think I finally understand what you meant. The light turned green and we drove toward home, leaving behind the diner that had been the battleground for our family's darkest chapter, and was now once again the heart of its brightest future. Have you ever discovered that the things someone mocked you for ended up being your greatest strength? Or have you experienced family betrayal that ultimately led to unexpected blessings? I'd truly love to hear your stories in the comments. And if this journey of fighting for family legacy resonated with you, please subscribe to join our community of resilience. Share this with someone who might need to be reminded that sometimes being underestimated is your secret weapon. Thank you for being part of my story today, and remember, success isn't what you take from the world, but what you give back. Thank you for watching this family drama unfold, and I hope to see you in the next video. I always joke that the best revenge isn't served cold. It's served with a side of fresh baked pie at a diner your brother tried to destroy. Life has a funny way of coming full circle, doesn't it? When I look back at who I was, when this all started, that intimidated waitress, watching her brother's BMW cruise by, I barely recognize her. Not because I've changed completely, but because I finally see the strength that was there all along. The same strength Grandpa saw when he trusted me with his first diner. James might have had the fancy degree and the luxury car, but I had persistence, community, and truth on my side. Sometimes, the person others underestimate turns out to be the most formidable opponent of all. Today, the Reynolds Family Legacy Foundation has helped 12 aspiring entrepreneurs start their own businesses. Grandpa's health has remained stable. And as for me, I still wear that blue waitress uniform at least once a week, not because I have to, but because I want to. It reminds me of where I came from and what I fought for. If there's one lesson I've learned through all this, it's that true success isn't measured by fancy cars or impressive titles. It's measured by what you give back to the world and the legacy you build for those who come after you. If you've enjoyed this story of family betrayal and justice served, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life dramas. Share this video with someone who might need a reminder that sometimes being just anything, a waitress, a teacher, a nurse, can be exactly what makes you extraordinary. Leave a comment below about a time someone underestimated you that ended up being their biggest mistake. Your stories inspire me as much as I hope mine has inspired you. Until next time, this is Sophia Reynolds reminding you that sometimes the most important ingredient in life isn't found in any recipe, it's the courage to stand up for what matters most.